Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here on behalf of the Center for Teaching and Learning, who's our sponsors for this event, and the UNESCO Chair on Multimodal Learning and Open Educational Resources. Very welcome. We present to you today Professor Rory McGreal. He's a UNESCO and International Council of Open and Distance Education Chair in Open Education Resources at Athabasca University in Canada. As such, he's charged with promoting OER internationally, particularly in developing nations, in support of UNESCO's Strategic Goal 4. He's also the co-editor of the International Review of Research in Open and Distributed Learning, a leading open access journal, and he's the founder of the OER Knowledge Cloud, a repository of research articles on OER. He's also the recipient of several national and international awards for open and distance learning, and we've got the privilege to listen to him today for 2 sessions. You're very welcome. Over to Professor Rory.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for coming to listen and to hopefully learn something about open education resources and where we're going with that. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I'll start off by telling you that all of the slides that you see are openly licensed. However, some of the images are being used under fair dealing, which allows them to be used for education and research purposes. My role as a UNESCO chair is to support the 2012 Paris Declaration on Open Educational Resources. And basically this declaration states that in order to achieve Strategic Development Goal 4, which is education for all, OER are critical. They don't say that open educational resources are the answer or the only thing that we need, but they do believe, and we all believe, that any solution to the problem of educating all people in the world, OER will play a significant role. And we have a group around the world now in many different countries on all continents. And these are chairholders in open education, different types of open education. You have Jaco here in your university. He's a recent chair. And I guess I'm the oldest chair. But I'm getting used to being an old man, so it's not too bad. Now, also for me, the challenge in the 21st century is that by 2025 there'll be about 100 million students capable of post-secondary education, but will not be able to access it, either because it just isn't available in their area, or they can't afford it. And we need to address this problem. And back in 2015, John Daniel, the CEO of the Commonwealth of Learning, he said that we would, in order to meet this needs in the traditional way, we would have to build 4 new universities every week between 2015 and 2025 in order to meet it. And these are universities with an average number of students of 30,000. And basically we know that's impossible. So we have to find new ways of delivering learning to large numbers of students. That's the question that we need to address in the 21st century. How do we educate all these learners? Mikhail John, the former Governor General of Canada, told us a few years ago that education is a weapon of mass construction. That in order to build your economy, to build your society, the best weapon we have is education. As part of this, what we need to address is the whole concept of mobile learning. And I gained this awareness in 1999. I was driving through a small village in the Philippines island with no electricity. And I slammed on the brakes because I could not believe what I saw. And what I saw was a farmer in a field up to his knees in a rice paddy behind 2 oxen, and he was digital messaging. In 1999 in Canada, nobody was digital messaging. In the year 2000, I got a phone that allowed for digital messaging, and there was only one other person in the whole country who I could mess it with. And my wife used to laugh at us with our digital messaging. But in 1999, in the Philippines, they had more digital messaging per capita than any other country in the world. And I checked last year, that is still the case. They do more digital messaging than anyone else. But what struck me was that that device that he had in his hand was a more powerful computer than the one I had on my desktop 2 years earlier. That's when it hit me that this is a way we can reach students everywhere, wherever they are, and it opened totally new possibilities for education. And in 2004, I came up with this slide, and people were amazed. I said, look at these devices. You can, they're an electronic book, radio, telephone, computer, PDA, game player, camera, web browser, email, clock, and you can phone with it. And people were absolutely amazed back then. I was amazed by it. And now, this looks like a joke. There's 2.5 million applications for your mobile device. Over 200,000 medical applications for your mobile device. What a change. And we don't see them as phones anymore. People, the greatest use of them is not talking on the phone. And we know that because my sons never phone their mother, ever, and they all have mobile devices. We call this new world pervasive computing, where it's everywhere. There are 2 billion internet connections in the world. The world population is 7.8 billion. 1/4 of the world's population is connected to the internet. The world is going mobile. We have to be thinking of people learning using mobile devices, because that's the way the world is. There's 5 billion mobile devices, 3 billion mobile internet users. 1 out of every 3 people only access the internet via mobile. And the growth continues. So as now there's more people with mobile phones than people who have electricity. So it's a growing phenomenon in the world. And what it means for us as educators is this. We must design for mobile first. Don't design for a paper textbook. Don't design for a desktop. The number of desktops being sold has been dropping for quite a few years. People aren't using them anymore. Design for mobile devices. And the advantage of that is if you design for mobile first, you can easily print it out if you need to. You can easily put it on a desktop. But if you design for print or you design for a desktop, it's very difficult and problematic to put it onto a mobile device. So we've got to change our views. We're stuck in this world that doesn't exist anymore. And we need to recognize that our students are using mobile devices. The internet is the world's biggest commons, intellectual commons. And the public domain is a priceless shared heritage. We have a huge amount of knowledge now available to anyone who wants to access it on the internet. And we need to take full advantage of that. I want to go back now to talk about the whole idea of copyright and how it came about. And in ancient world, going back 20,000 years, the concept of copyright was utterly foreign to the ancient mind. In fact, people who copied were the most respected people in society. The idea that there was something evil or wrong about copying never occurred to people. These ancient scribes were very well respected in whatever community they were in, and copying was considered a virtue. The first copyright law came with Columkill, or St. Columba, in Ireland. He copied St. Finian's psalm book without his permission. The king ruled to every cow its calf, to every book its copy, meaning that he could not copy this psalm book, that he's not allowed to. It came to blows, and actually 3,000 men died in the Battle of Culloden in the west of Ireland in 561. So it came to very drastic blows. And what happened was St. Columba was exiled to Scotland, and he kept on copying up there, and he was surrounded by other monks who were copyists, and they copied and copied and copied, and they went over to Europe, and actually they're the ones who put an end to the Dark Ages in Europe. They brought their copies with them and brought knowledge and education to the masses all over Europe. So, copyright, what does it mean? Copyright, well, let me ask you, what's your view? What is copyright? What do you think it is? No one dare talk. Yeah.
The way I see it, you can't, it's preventing you from doing something. It's a preventative rule or preventative measure, actually. So you can't copy something. It's a rule. Yeah.
Yes, well, that is a very good aspect of copyright. You're quite right. It prevents people from copying. And why?
Because it's my work.
It's my work.
Yes.
And this is what's happening is the original purpose of copyright has been morphed into what the publishers want you to think it is. But it is not that at all. Copyright was instituted for one reason only, and that is to encourage learning and promote the progress of science and the useful arts. It was not instituted to keep people from copying. In fact, it was instituted to restrict the rights of the author and the publishers and to limit their rights. And it was not put in to protect the rights of the author. And they don't want you to understand that. They want you to believe, oh, copyright is there to protect my rights as an author. No, copyright in the common law tradition, and South Africa is a common law country like all the British Commonwealth countries and the United States, was instituted to promote the progress of science, to encourage learning, and Jazzy calls this idea that copyright is there to protect the rights of the author as para-copyright or pseudo-copyright. The original copyright law that we live on today is the Statute of Queen Anne, 1710. Look at the title. An Act for the Encouragement of Learning. What is copyright about? It's about encouraging learning. Very clearly, that is the purpose of copyright. And again, restricting the rights of the authors and publishers for a limited time so as that knowledge would be able to spread around society. The American version of copyright is based on Queen Anne's law, very clearly and historically. And they call it an act to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. And it was led by George Washington. The President, Thomas Jefferson, said of copying, its peculiar character is that no one possesses the less because every other possesses the whole of it. He who receives an idea from me receives instruction himself without lessening mine, as he who lights his taper at mine receives light without darkening me. What he's saying is that's the nature of copying. You don't take anything away from somebody. You retain whatever you have. He also said, and this has to do as a criticism of the extension of copyright. They extended it first, it was 17 years, then 24 years, then 50 years. Now they're pushing it 70 years in many countries. And he said that I set out on this ground, which is, I suppose to be self-evident, that the earth belongs in usufruct to the living, that the dead have neither powers nor rights over it. But now with the extension of copyright, they're saying that dead authors, dead publishers, they control how we use the product. And it's a very nefarious development. I could tell you a personal story is my sister says she wants to be buried in a cardboard box. And she wants to do this to embarrass her husband and her brother, make us look cheap. And again, this is it, it's the dead, like she still wants to have power and control over us even after she's dead. So this idea is very nefarious. Jefferson says that inventions cannot be a subject of property. And in common law, they are not property. They call it intellectual property. They use the term intellectual property, but there's been quite a few court cases in quite a few different common law jurisdictions. It is not property. What it is what Madison refers to. It's a privileged monopoly. It is not property. Incentive, not property or natural law, is the foundational justification for American copyright. It is a privileged monopoly. They don't use the word monopoly because we hate monopolies. We love property, so they use the term property. And but in British common law that we all live on in the common former colonial empire, it is not property, it is a monopoly. It is a monopoly granted to the author. Why? In order to promote learning, to encourage learning. That's what copyright is. John Perry Barlow put it this way: the greatest constraint on your future liberties may come not from government, but from corporate legal departments laboring to protect by force what can no longer be protected by practical efficiency or general social consent. And so he's critical of these companies that are bringing in very strict copyright in order to make sure that people don't get access to knowledge, which is the opposite of the reasoning why we incorporated copyright in the first place. So what does it mean, copyright? No one owns ideas. Ideas belong to everyone. There is no such thing as an original idea. All ideas are based on previous ideas. Going back 50, 100,000 years, every step, every knowledge that we have is based on previous knowledge. Copyright holders possess a copyright. And it's a shame that they put it into one word and tried to make it something different than what it was originally intended to be. Copyright protects the expression of ideas, not the ideas. And holders have a limited right to control the expression of their ideas for a limited time, but they keep extending the limited time all the time. What it doesn't mean is droit d'auteur, the author's right. In Europe, this is their copyright law, and it's based on the Napoleonic Code. Yes, there they do have it. It is the rights of the author. That is their interpretation of well, they don't call it copyright, they call it droit d'auteur. They use that term, droit d'auteur, not copyright. So they're two different concepts. But they came together in 1963 when they formed the World Intellectual Property Organization. And that's when, in order to allow people to read your work, you had to put a CC, an open license, because before that, before 1963 in the common law countries, everything was public domain. Anything written, anything creative work, everything was public domain by default. And in order to make it copyrighted, you had to put a little C with a circle, all rights reserved, or a symbol like that on. Otherwise it was, anyone could use it, anyone could copy it, no problem. But in 1963 they turned it upside down, and they said now everything is copyrighted. And if you want people to freely be able to access your work, then you have to put in a special license. And today we have the Creative Commons license for that. So they use the word intellectual property. In common law, it is not correct to use this term. It is a misleading term. The correct term is a privileged monopoly. And again, I'll say it again, there are court cases that show this, that the publishers have tried to turn it into property, and it just hasn't worked. And why do they do that? Why do they turn it into property, or try to? Because we love property. William Blackstone said in the 18th century, there's nothing which so generally strikes the imagination and engages the affections of mankind as the right of property. Monopoly, bad; property, good, so they use the term property. This is a 18th, early 19th century poem, Stealing the Goose. They hang the man and flog the woman who steals the goose from off the common, but leaves the greater villain loose, who steals the common from off the goose. So they try to get people who breach copyright and sue them, and that's happening all the time, but nobody is suing the people who use copyright in order to take millions of works out of the public domain, so people can't use them. There are millions of orphan works going back from about the 1920s up to the 1960s that we cannot access because they blocked it off with the extension of copyright. Monopoly controls have been the exception in free societies. They have been the rule in closed societies. This is from Lawrence Lessig. He's the founder of the Creative Commons, the open licensing organization. So, for educators, how do we deal with this restrictive copyright environment that we're living in? And the best way, we believe, is to move away from it, get away from that strict copyright, using open educational resources. And the definition is, UNESCO has a definition of them, but it's basically open resources are those that you can use any way you want, whenever you want. You don't have to pay. There's no, you don't have restrictions on them, and you can use them for your courses, for your personal use, any kind of use whatsoever, without permissions. You make them an open education resource by using an open license. And here's the gamut of the open licenses. The freest one is the public domain. And anything published before about the 1920s is public domain. The works of Tennyson, the Bible, the Pilgrim's Progress, all of these, they are public domain. Anyone can copy them use them any way they want, however they want. But if it's within the 70 years or the 50 years time frame, depending on which country you're in, if you want to use things after that date, if you want them to be made available to people, you have to put in an open license. And the best one that is most recommended is CC BY or attribution. And we say that because, especially in academia, you can't use a resource without citing the author. You know, it's plagiarism if you do that. So you have to put the attribution of the author. And even if it's a public domain work, where legally you don't have to put the author's name, but if you use the public domain one in an academic environment without, say, you know, pretending that a poem by Tennyson is yours, that's plagiarism as well. So academically, even though legally you can do that with a public domain work, but you can't do it in an academic environment. So you need to attribute the author. And the next open license, and sometimes people say that it's better than the CC BY, is the CC BY SA share alike, which means that you can use this work, you can change it, add to it, do whatever you want with it, but you must keep the same license. You cannot change the license. And some people, for example, might take a section of a book or whatever, open education resource, add theirs to it, and then change the license to non-commercial or something else. Well, if it's got share alike on, they can't do that. They have to keep that license. And the next one there is CC BY non-commercial. And that means that nobody can make money off it without your permission. And so if they think they're going to sell it, which they're allowed to do, if it doesn't have that on there, if it just has CC BY, they can go and sell the stuff. And you get nothing from it. So if you put the dollar sign on there, non-commercial, then you would share in if any money came, you'd be able to say to them, well, you have to give me a percentage or whatever, make a deal with them. We don't recommend it. We believe it should be open to everyone. And the other one is no derivatives, CC BY, no derivatives, ND. And what that means is anyone can use it any way they want, but they can't change it. And we don't like this one because educational resources, we want the ability to adapt and change and do what we want with them. So we don't recommend it. But it is useful in some circumstances. For example, if you have a scholarly article that you want to exist as is and you don't want people to change it. So they are useful. We don't recommend them, but you can use these more restrictive licenses. So what is OER? Some people, well, it's just textbooks. It's more than textbooks. It could be a game, educational games. It could be a video. It could be a podcast. It could be curriculum material. It could be a wide range of applications or text or whatever. It could be anything. The key is that it's openly licensed for use by anybody, anywhere. Who here has heard of the twitch as a unit of measurement? You know what a twitch is, eh? That's a twitch. But it's used in computer game design as a unit of measurement. Has anyone heard this? Heard of this? No? Well, it's equal to 2 jiffies, or 200 milliseconds. And what is it? It's the amount of time to press a button or move a joystick in one direction or the other. 200 milliseconds. In 200 milliseconds, electrons on a wire can travel 20,000 kilometers. There is nowhere on Earth further away than 20,000 kilometers. What does this tell us? that God, in his or her infinite wisdom, designed the world perfectly for playing video games. So, and video games are very powerful learning tools. They are very powerful. They are used extensively by the American military for training. And why do they do it? Because it's the fastest way they can get soldiers up to scratch and learn things. They are very powerful learning tools. So you have the Creative Commons. Remember that the ones on the left are the open ones, attribution and share alike, and the others, we do not recommend you use them unless absolutely necessary. No derivatives, non-commercial. The way forward for us in education is all publicly funded content should be openly licensed. And as a Canadian, we don't usually like to say good things about the United States. But the former President, Obama, led the world in pushing for this. And he actually wrote letters to the Canadian Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, the German, many countries around the world, saying publicly funded content from your country should be openly licensed. And we are doing it in the United States. Not only that, they did it. They had done it in the United States. And many other countries now are following suit on that. Is this, if the taxpayer pays for it, then it should be open. Every taxpayer should be able to access it, which to me is a pretty simple concept to understand. But in fact, there's all kinds of companies that have made a lot of money by taking publicly funded content, closing it off, and making themselves the sole suppliers of it. So, with OER, you can mix them, create a new resource, you can adapt them in multiple contexts. For example, a statistics course in psychology you can use in nursing or some other field. You can extract stuff. If you don't like it, you can pull it out. Localize it, make it available for your country or your institution, and you can translate to another language, or you can reuse, repurpose it in any way you want. And there's other ways that can be augmented, edited, customized, aggregated, reformatted. You can make mashups. Do whatever you want with them. You're free to do it in the way that you are not free to do with commercial content. You can assemble courses. And we've got to get away from the fact that you create courses. No, you can assemble them. Take this piece and that module and another module, like an IKEA set. You assemble it and put it together from all different modules. And this can help save time, save creativity, etc. OER increase access to high quality content, to additional learning resources, supplementary materials. They bring about savings and efficiencies. The marginal cost and effort in making copies and distributing online is zero. So you can have major savings and efficiencies. Speed and immediacy. You can develop a course. If you need a course right away, you can go online and find it. And I can give you the example of a professor at our university. He was a computer science professor, and he needed to develop a course in green computing. And he thought it was going to take him a year. So I said to him, why don't you look online to see if there's any OER? And he said to me, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, Google green computing course. And he was a bit embarrassed because he was a computer science teacher and he knew that. He did know that. Anyway, we looked down the front page of it, and halfway down, green computing course, Australian National University. He said, oh, that's interesting. he looked at it and he went home and looked at it for a week. And I met him a week later. He said, it's got everything I need. I don't have to develop the course. He's got the really good course put together. And it was in Moodle, the learning management system that we use, even the same version of Moodle. So all he did was he contacted the professor, downloaded it, and put it up on his. But because he was a Canadian patriot, he got rid of some of the Australian examples and put in Canadian examples. But then he shared the Canadian examples with the Australian. And they developed a sharing relationship as they're going forward with the course. And that's what I mean, it's good for sharing, is that if it's openly licensed, you can share very easily. But if you're both using commercial content, you can't share. You're stuck with the way it is. You cannot do any kind of sharing, especially among different jurisdictions. If you have commercial content and you're trying to deliver a course to different countries, you have major problems because they have all different copyright laws and different licenses. It becomes extremely difficult to share. You can republish. So take the OER, move it around and distribute it to your classes. You can use multiple channels, and you can have multiple versions of the same concept, which is very good in education because different people learn in different ways at different times in different subjects. So they may not like the way you explained it in class, and they can go to an OER and see, oh, okay, now I get it. They see another way of explaining it. And of course, we can take advantage of the wisdom of crowds. So as if a lot of people are working together, creating OER, distributing OER, it could get better and better quality improvement because two heads are better than one, and 10 heads are better than 2 heads, and etc. It's good for informal and formal learning. In fact, OER helped to bridge the gap between informal and formal learning. So for example, your university and ours, we are members of the OERU, which is a consortium of 30 institutions around the world. And what we're doing is trying to build a bridge for informal learners to get accreditation and get formal accreditation for their informal learning. And we can do that with OER. It bridges the gap by increasing access to learning, and it unites personal interest and independent learning and allows you to get credit for what you know or the skills that you have. Again, it's through OER course assembly, or another, a newer phenomenon that's arisen recently is constructing OER with the students, is working with students to build an open educational resource together, and this helps in learning. And we all know that if you teach something, it helps you learn it better. Because you have to know, and sometimes you're teaching something and you think to yourself, you know, I don't really know this. I'm not explaining this very well. So by getting the students involved in creating OER and teaching it to other students, they are learning better and getting greater control over their learning. So yeah, learner-generated content it supports new ways of co-constructing ideas and the knowledge created, targeted, and shared with others. And you can have partnering with different people, and you do that. That's what we're doing with the OERU. Our university has created 2 courses, your university 2 courses, Thompson Rivers 2 courses, UNISA 2, and then we're sharing and we're partnering together to create a program. And it allows for mass participation. And this is very important if we're talking about educating hundreds of millions of students. We need mass participation, and this cannot be done with commercial content. Quite simply, it cannot be done. The licenses in so many different countries are so complex, the licensing, that it becomes impossible. You can self-publish your work using open education resources. You can individualize, because no one-size-fits-all textbook or curriculum. You can have different types of learning content, modules explaining concepts in different ways. And it supports online collaborations, because you're sharing the open content, which you cannot do with commercial content. You can share it and collaborate. And you can archive it. It can provide a web-based, viewable, reusable record of quality educational materials. So again, you're not allowed to do that with commercial content. So it supports international collaboration. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, OER are essential. It's not a nice thing to do. They're essential for international collaborations, because you cannot deal with all the different licenses in the, when you're using commercial content. We couldn't even do it in Canada among 5 universities within Canada. We could not work together using restrictive licensing. We've got a 10 million, and this is how I came to Open Education Resources. We did a project to develop a course in learning technologies with 5 provinces, 5 institutions in different provinces. And we said, okay, well, you know, you'll own this part, you'll own that part, and you'll give permission to this one and that one and the other one, and we'll do the permissions. And we thought, okay, that's it. But we found out that if you have 2 universities doing agreement, there might be 6 or 8 problems to resolve, no big deal. But when you add a third, it's not just 6 to 8 problems, it's now 6 to 8 times 3 problems. And you add a fourth, it becomes 6 to 8 times 4 problems, and it becomes impossible to make a deal. And what we found out was that our $10 million would all go for legal fees. And so what we did, that's when my eyes opened, and I really went for open content. And that's what we agreed to, is that it would be open. And this was even before Creative Commons or OER were put together. It was in the late 1990s, but it was a big lesson for us. We discussed it for about a day and a half. We were trying to figure out how to get around the ownership problem. And we can use OER for blended learning. And now, pretty well everywhere, blended learning is becoming the norm. In Canada now, there are no traditional classes that don't have some kind of an internet, either minimal or maximum, but they're on the internet in some way, they're blended. So it supports collaboration and partnerships, it supports knowledge sharing, there's major cost savings and efficiencies, quality improvements and standards alignment comes about. We can support for independent learning, and we have communications and community engagement by building these courses. Or, how about the course package bundle? People are thinking of OER in terms of modules, but an OER could be a picture. An OER could be a picture and text to create a lesson. You put that together, a few pictures, text, and you've created a lesson. You put a few lessons together, you've got a module. You put a few modules together, you have a course, and you put a few courses together, you've got a full program. At all those levels, they could be OER. The entire program can be OER. The entire course can be OER, or just module. And what we find is, and we estimate it's over 80%, probably even higher than that, is that most instructors want the full package. They don't want to be creating courses. They don't want to be picking modules and putting them together and doing all that. They just want the package for the course. And so in OER, we have to work on building more and more packages. We do now have hundreds of textbooks. So it's a full textbook on a wide range of courses, mainly at the first and second year level. But it's a growing body of open education resources. I'd recommend you check out the BC campus to see just what they have, and they've been localized. And one of the things that somebody brought up the other day here at the other campus, they said, well, what about, do you use foot, pounds, inches, or do you use the metric? And in Canada, we use the metric system. And you do here. And she's saying there's a problem in getting material from the United States because of the foot, pound, inches problem. Well, we have American texts in Canada, and we've done that for you. We've changed them to the metric system. So we've localized them for our use. I'd recommend that you go to the Commonwealth of Learning, and they have a wide range of material explaining what OER are and how to go about it, policies, implementation, etc. Great guidelines there. Just talk too about the pentalogy. We call it the pentalogy decision of the Canadian Supreme Court. And what the Canadian Supreme Court said was that fair dealing must be given a large and liberal interpretation. And what that means is, in common law, you have every right to use portions of work. You can't use the whole work without permission, but you can take portions of work for education and research purposes. And the Supreme Court has said it must be a large and liberal interpretation. That is, you can only take 3 things, or you can only take 5 or 10% of the work. No, it says it's a large and liberal interpretation. So, for example, if it's a photo, you can't take part of the photo. You can take the whole photo. That's reasonable. And the litmus test is this. Is number one, you ask yourself, am I a reasonable person? If the answer is yes, you ask yourself the second question. Does this seem reasonable? And if the answer is yes, you're probably right. It is fair dealing, you can use it. So I think if you see a textbook and you say, okay, I need 2 or 3 chapters, does this seem reasonable? Probably. You know, if you say I'm going to take 3/4 of the book, does that seem reasonable? Well, I think most of us would say, well, no, really, if you're going to use that much, you can buy the book. But what they've agreed is you can take a chapter from this book, a chapter from that book, put it in a course package, and release it to students, even if it is strictly copyrighted. You don't need an OER for that. And it's the only judgment in all of the common law countries. So it's an argument that can also be used here, Australia, and in other countries. So I'm running out of time, my God, I keep divulging off into things, into the sideline, but I want to talk quickly then about digital rights management and digital licenses, because that's why we really must have OER, because they're putting in digital locks, and they have restrictive licenses. These digital locks go into your operating system and prevent you from using your device the way you want to use it. And they've gone in and taken books away from people without further permission. They've just gone in, taken it out. They stop normal operating system functions, and they put defectiveness into your device. They ensure that your device can't be used the way you want to use it. And for example, they put it in, you can't use your copy and paste feature with their content. You can't use text-to-speech. Very difficult for visually disabled people. They can't use their text-to-speech devices. Can't form exchange. You can't move the material. You can't print it out. You can't even move it geographically from one country to the other. And you can't use it after an expiry date. And unlike a printed textbook, you can't resell it. So you're restricted. We talked earlier on about them talking about intellectual property, and it's not property, it's a monopoly. But your device is your property. Your mobile device, your laptop, that's your property. These digital locks restrict your freedom to use that property. And it's a simple question. Can we not own and control our own property? They put handcuffs on our devices, but we're innocent. Cory Doctorow says, there's no theory of capitalism that says that the state should regulate how you use your device. And we've all seen these things. They're quite common here in South Africa, I've noticed, and in Canada. And yeah, and some of them, the companies, they want to destroy your device if you're not using the content the way they want you to use it. And you think it's a joke? Check out this online, Error 53, where they turn your iPhone into a brick if you go to an unauthorized Apple dealer. Microsoft's ebook apocalypse, where one day they just took everybody's ebooks away and off their computers. But really, who's losing? Any obstacle that makes a record harder to listen to is bad news for the artist that made it. So it's harder to use commercial content than it is pirated content because they put these locks on. Now, the locks themselves are not the real problem because within 2 weeks of any lock coming out, somebody's broken it. They can be broken and it'll spread around the internet very quickly. But, so what they've done is they bring in these digital licenses. How many have read the license? You know when you click on I agree? How many? Who's read the license? I'm the only nerd in the room who reads licenses. I read quite a few of them and they're very restrictive. But basically, they say that you can't copy paste, you can't move them, you can't print them out. All the things that the law prevents you from doing, they say legally you can't do it either. And they say they have no liability if the product doesn't work. They say they can come into your computer at any time without permission and use your personal data, not just the data about their application, any of your personal data. You've agreed to it, you clicked on I agree. You agree that you have a privilege to use the product, you don't own it, and you're prohibited to show your content to somebody else. So if you see a real spicy part, you're reading 50 Shades of Grey and you want to show it to your spouse, you've broken the law. It's illegal for you to do that, and you've agreed to that. So you must accept that you have no rights. You don't have fair dealing rights. So very restrictive, these agreements. And basically they're saying we're going to own all of it, whether you like it or not, deal with it. And here's a license that they can come into your premises at any time, day or night, and search your accounts, etc. You could be in jail. What are you in jail for? It's a criminal offense, you know. I showed my wife a page from my ebook. It's a criminal offense. You would be very low on the totem pole in prison hierarchy if you got in jail for that. So what's the answer? Go open. Leave them. Leave them with all their restrictive commercial content and digital locks and everything, and go open. With open, you can do whatever you want and you don't have to deal with all of that nonsense. I believe openness is essential for e-learning implementations. And here's one: you can't, in the license, you've agreed that you can't make a nuclear weapon. That's in your iPhone license. So we've come to a stage now, do you own what you pay for? Vendors now control how, when, where, and with what specific brands of technological assistance audiences are able to access content. They control your device. They brought a new concept into the world. You buy, but you don't get. Do you remember the world we used to live in? You bought something, you owned it, you got it. Do you remember that world? We don't live in that world anymore. Do you remember if you buy a hammer, nobody can tell you what nails to use? You can use any kind of nails you want. Well, we don't live in a world like that anymore. You buy something and they control it. And this is very serious. Audrey Waters says that we're now under the control of the billionaires in Silicon Valley. Cory Doctorow says that companies are controlling us like aristocrats controlled us in the past. They own everything, we own nothing. And in Canada we have the problem, a guy bought a tractor, a Massey Ferguson tractor from another farmer, brought it to his farm, and Massey Ferguson disabled the software. He couldn't use his tractor. And they said, okay, pay Massey Ferguson $10,000 because the software was only licensed to the previous guy. Pay us $10,000 and in 3 weeks we'll come up and fix it. Well, he couldn't wait 3 weeks, but luckily he had a 14-year-old son who knew his way around the web. And he found a pirate copy, installed it on his father's machine, and he was able to make use of his tractor. If caught, he could be, he was anonymous on the radio talking about it, because if caught, he could be put in jail for doing that. Think about it, your car you have today, you don't own the software on that car. They have full legal rights and control over that software. A heart monitor, you don't own the software on the heart monitor. You don't know, can it be hacked, can it not be hacked? You don't know that. So it's a very serious problem. Anyway, somehow the notion of actually owning the things you buy has become revolutionary. If you bought it, you should own it. It's as simple as that. Everything you know is wrong. Every day, computers are making people easier to use. But openness is the skeleton key that unlocks every attempt at vendor control and lock-in. Leave them with their strict rules. Go open. If we go open, they cannot control us. I'll finish with this statement. The Royal Society in the UK is the oldest scientific society in the world. And they say the restriction of the commons by patents, copyright, and databases is not in the interests of society and unduly hampers scientific endeavor. And the previous Pope Benedict says that there is excessive zeal for protecting knowledge to an unduly rigid assertion of the right to intellectual property. What does that tell us? That both science and God are on our side. We are on the side of the angels, so we need to go open. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rory. It's very insightful. We've got time maybe for one question. If I can maybe ask if you could leave the rest of the questions after the second session. Any pressing questions at this point? Yes.
How is this concept of open affecting the economy? The monetary. Obviously, there's industries that rely on making money from information, publishers paying people to write and compile and edit and format content. So what is the impact of OERs on the economy?
Well, educational publishing is the most profitable arm of the publishing industry. They have a ridiculously high 35% profit margin. There is no other industry in the world that has such a high profit margin. So educational publishing is a ripoff. They are charging an excessive amount for it, but they make more money from educational publishing than all the others put together. Forget about Harry Potter or 50 Shades of Grey. They make their money from us, from educational publishing. So this is a way of getting away from them, and they want to control us. They want to say, you get our textbook and you have to do this and you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do the other thing. Why should we agree with them? It's tough bananas for them. But will there be more jobs? Everyone will always be creating content. We'll switch the money that we give to them and we'll use it for creating open education resources. And that's already happening. That's already happening. We'll take that money and put it into local publishers who will open up the content.
But they're not paying for it. So they don't receive any money for doing that. So
of course they do, yeah.
Who pays for it?
Yeah. The universities and the students, instead of paying these people exorbitant money, you pay a student fee. That fee goes to pay the people who make the open content. It's a matter of, instead of taking this money and giving it to them, take this money and give it to publishers who will open the content. And they say, oh, well, what about the professors who create the content? Most of them make peanuts. The publishers make a huge amount of money. The people who create the content make peanuts. There are a few stars who make a huge amount of money, and they're not going to support us, let's face it. They're not going to support it. But most academics make very little. So what we do is we give a few $1,000s to a professor and say, you know, you created this textbook, we'll give you $5,000 or $10,000. That's more money than they would get from the publisher. And so, yeah, it's a matter of moving the money from one side to the other. Now, all of this content is needed and will be published. Somebody has to work and create it. So there's going to be no job losses. There'll be job losses from Elsevier, where the CEO last year made £4.5 million, not dollars, pounds, and he had 8 vice presidents who made more than £1 million off of us because of these ridiculously high profit margins. They're making a fortune off of us. We are fools. We're the most educated people in society, and we are fools. Apple only gets a 20% profit margin. They get 35 this year. It was 40% the year before. Like, these are ridiculous profit margins. They are ripping us off. And, you know, we should wake up and realize that.
Thank you, Prof. I think to introduce the next session, I see there's 1 or 2 people who have joined us. Welcome. Prof. Rory McGill is the UNESCO Chair, ICDE Chair on Open Educational Resources from Athabasca in Canada, and he will now be presenting Open Educational Resources, Challenge of the Future with a Glimpse at the Past. Over to you.
You may have noticed that I'm somewhat opinionated and biased in favor of It's a good one. So again, these are open access, openly licensed slides. Watch out, the images are not openly licensed, but you can use them for educational and research purposes. So I just show you where I come from. It's right there, Athabasca in northern Alberta. So it's a pretty cold place, so it's why I appreciate the invitation to be here. Some people don't really understand what we're talking about by snow. I had to laugh on my way through London. I talked to my brother-in-law and he said, "Oh look, it's snowing." And I had to laugh. There were these little white things, little dribble white things coming out of the sky. I said, "That's not snow. This is snow." And one of the worst experiences you can have is if you dig your car out of the snow and you find out it's not your car. Of course, we laugh at the snow, so it doesn't bother us that much. But this is our university campus. We do have summer, and it is nice weather in Canada in the summertime, so it's okay. And we've talked about the challenge. I won't mention it again, but it's very important that we find ways of dealing with this problem of how to educate all of these learners. I'm going to go back and explain how we get to this situation today with the economy. And I believe we need to have a real understanding of what the economy is like and what's happening. And it sort of went like this, that in the beginning of the 19th century, you had the Industrial Revolution, the first mechanical devices, and you often hear people say, "Oh, technology, it's just a tool." Well, it's not just a tool. This changed our lives. This changed the way we perceive the world. These are world-altering events. It's not just a tool. These are extremely major changes in the way we live and the way we perceive the world. And the next big one was the assembly line at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, where they created the assembly line. Again, manufacturing, it allowed big cities to go, or highways, etc. Changed our lives. The third one is the computer revolution. And again, it just changes everything. I mean, we don't even understand all the repercussions that have happened because of the computer age. And now we're moving into the age of artificial intelligence and intelligent machines. And no one can predict what's going to happen. It's going to be a massive change for all of us. The economic drivers that were once transportation and manufacturing are now computers and telecommunications. And it's a major shift in my lifetime that this has happened. And this shift has been based on bits of information. So people think of in the computer there's voice, there's data, there's images coming down. And really all that's coming down are bits, little bits of information. And what are they? Well, they have no mass, they have no volume, they can be reproduced infinitely at no cost, they move at the speed of light. We see them as ones and zeros. That's how we signify them, but they're not ones and zeros. It's an on-off switch. That's all it is, on, off, on, off. Well, our economy is based on this. This is the world economy today. It's based on that, those ones and zeros, those on-off switches. And people have a hard time grasping what the implications of that are. What's the difference between these two memory sticks? One's worth $1.50, the other's worth $150,000. What's the difference? the information.
Stored it.
Yeah, we had a good, on Monday we had a good one from one of the teachers and said, well, this one's got OER, the other one's got commercial content. Wow, that's a good one, I hadn't thought of that. But the point I'm trying to make here is what's the difference? Is the ones and zeros are different on that one, and people are willing to pay $150,000 for it. This one here could be 1100 111110 1000, etc. And the other one is 11100010. That's all it is. If you look at it, all it is these on-off switches. It's just full of on-off switches. The world economy is based on that difference. You know, and all of these software companies that are making huge amounts of money, what do they produce? Nothing. They're producing nothing. All they're doing is changing ones to zeros and zeros to ones. That is all they're doing. And we say, well, how can a world economy be based on that? And the fact is, it is. The top 10 companies in the world are primarily, if not solely, creators of applications. All they're doing is changing ones and zeros. That's what they're doing. Apple, actually Amazon has now replaced Apple at the top. Alphabet, which owns Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Alibaba, Berkshire Hathaway, Tencent, JP Morgan. These are all companies that make their money, the 10 largest companies in the world, by moving bits, changing bits of information and sending them around the world. That's the basis of our economy. It's very hard for us to get our mind around it. They're bigger than ExxonMobil, they're bigger than Walmart, bigger than General Electric. It's a different world and a different economy that we live in. Look at Airbnb, the largest hotel company in the world. They don't own a single hotel. Uber, largest taxi company in the world. They don't own a single car. Well, maybe they do in their offices, but they use other people's cars. So really, all of this is based on these ones and zeros. And it's very hard for us to get our mind around that. And we have to look at what we're talking about. And this is such an important distinction that the U.S. is a major exporter of cultural products, and it has unsurprisingly made stronger copyright protection a core element of its trade strategy. The ones and zeros are protected by copyright. That's the only protection that they have. And so the U.S. is big on protecting copyright. And if you looked at a map of where royalties go in the world, you can see the three big blobs. One is the United States, the second is Europe, the third is Japan. This is where these are the countries that are supporting strict regulation of copyright. And over 50% of the world's royalties go to the United States. So that explains the U.S.'s strict copyright terms that they're trying to impose, with success they're imposing on everyone around the world. And again, it's because they're dependent now. The economy is based on those ones and zeros, and the only protection is from copyright. But, hey, China invented this 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, the yin and the yang, dividing reality into two aspects. And they're not demanding any royalties. Not for that, anyway. But Tencent is doing it. And the Singapore government said quite a few years ago, they recognized global competition in telecommunications is an overwhelming and irreversible tide. We can neither go against, alter, nor shut out this tide. We will simply be bypassed and rendered irrelevant. And more recently, Singapore has put education in this. The global competition in education is an irreversible tide. And they have declared themselves to be the education hub for Asia. And they see that this is important for the development of their economy. So what's happening, Aronowitz and DeFazio put it this way: not only has abstract knowledge come to the center of the world's political economy, but there is also a tendency to produce and trade in symbolic significations rather than concrete products. Today, knowledge rather than traditional skill is the main productive force. And the Irish poet Yeats put it much more eloquently. The visible world is no longer a reality, and the unseen world is no longer a dream. And what's happening with economic activity? 2000, about 25% of economic activity was education and training. By 2020, it's 60%. And people ask, well, how is that? You know, what about oil? Well, look at the oil industry. Their workers are undergoing training and education all the time. Look at the insurance industry. Look at the travel industry. Education and training, lifelong, is becoming part of what you do as a worker. And in all industries, the construction industry, mechanics, they're all learning and training all the time. Learning and training is coming to the center of the political economy. And make no mistake about it, personal livelihoods are threatened, new markets are up for grabs, and national fortunes are at stake, depending on how we respond to this new digital economy. And Taiichi Sakaya wrote the book, The Knowledge Value Revolution, because he realized that what we're talking about is knowledge, that our economy is the knowledge economy. And we look at those bits of information, it's all about knowledge. It's how to arrange those bits of information and how then we train people. And what he said was, for example, you look at something like a memory stick or a bottle even. Is what are you buying? Are you buying the 0.001 cent of plastic that's in there? Are you buying the water, the filtered water, that's worth about 1 cent, which you're paying about 50 cents for it, but it's worth about 1 cent? You're buying the knowledge embedded in the object. So as in that object, you're buying the knowledge that created the machine to mold the plastic, the plastic itself. How do you develop plastic? How do you mold the plastic? How do you sell the plastic? You are buying the knowledge that's embedded in the object. So you look at, for example, a key. A key has about 1 cent worth of metal in it. But what are you buying? You pay 50 cents or $1 for the key. You're buying the knowledge that's embedded in that key. And this is what Saiichi Akawa is talking about, that in everything we buy, there is knowledge. Well, guess what? What do? We're the educators. What's our job? We create and transmit knowledge. That is what we do. We are at the center of this new economy. And a lot of teachers don't understand the relevance of that and the importance of education and training in this economy. We are the ones who develop it. In northern Alberta, we have a huge tract of tar sands. And we have companies up there digging it out and converting it into oil and selling it, selling it around the world. And they say, oh, this is the basis of our economy in Alberta, is these tar sands. And no, those tar sands, if we didn't have educated engineers, if we didn't have skilled tradesmen, if we didn't have accountants, if we didn't have all of those people, educated people who have the knowledge, do you know what we'd have there in northern Alberta? A bunch of tar, sticky mud. That's what's up there. It's sticky mud. But if you put the sticky mud and you get educated, trained people on it, you have an economy. It's the knowledge. You're not buying, when people are buying oil that's made from that sticky mud, what are they buying? They're not buying the sticky mud. They're buying the knowledge of all those people who contributed and put the knowledge into the product. And we need to rethink how we think of ourselves as educators and what our place in the economy is. So let's get real. Now, Kurzweil, he's the Silicon Valley millionaire, and he's written about this, the changes that happened. And he's looking here, what happened in the 1990s when the World Wide Web came, an explosion. Changed everything. People were absolutely amazed how quickly this change came. It was mind-boggling. And but what Kurzweil is telling us that the reason it was mind-boggling and the change came so quickly is because we as human beings, we think linearly. And he claims that the world is changing exponentially. And he said, if you look from the very beginnings of the electromechanical era, through relay switches, through vacuum tubes, through transistors, all the way up to integrated circuits, if you put it on an exponential scale, it's a straight line. It was eminently predictable. He predicted in the 1990s that we'd have the first computer with more intelligence than a human being by 2010. In fact, it was built by IBM in 2009. So he predicts also that by 2030, we will have a computer with more intelligence than the entire human race with his exponential predictions. However, we need to be cautious about exponential predictions because when Elvis Presley died, there were about 100 Elvis impersonators. And within 10 years, there were thousands. And within 20 years, there were 100,000 Elvis impersonators. And if this trend continues, half the world will be Elvis impersonators in the next few years. So we have to be cautious of his exponential predictions. John Frank and Fraser Mustard put it this way, that societies that have a strong, coherent sense of what is important and a collective will probably be the most successful. And we have to understand what's happening and start to address the problem. And we believe that distance education, now online learning, is essential for us in the future. And what you have, though, are the people we call the educational Amish. In Canada, we have people who choose to live in the 19th century. They're free to do that, and they live in their regions, and they have their horse and carts. They plow behind a horse. They will not use any 20th century, 21st century technology. They choose to do that. Well, we have people in education who are like that. They think that God created the classroom years ago and that there's no better way of teaching, and this is the only way you can teach. We call them the educational creationists, that everything depends on the creation of the classroom, and they don't believe that there can be any other way of teaching. Well, Eric Hoffer put it this way: in times of great change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. they don't keep up with the changes. So they think that, okay, so God created the classroom years ago and this is the best way, the only really good way of teaching. And let's look at the facts. Is in the Western tradition, the classroom teaching was probably invented by Hero in the Library of Alexandria. And he would bring students into the room to learn. And he didn't do this for any pedagogical reason. He did it for one reason, and one reason only. There was only one copy of the manuscript. There was no other way of doing it. So he'd bring them into the classroom, and he'd teach them using the manuscript that was in the library. And by the way, Hero was a pagan. He didn't believe in God, so God could not possibly have created the classroom. The pagans invented it. However, St. Paul, he invented distance education. He wrote his epistles. They were copied by copyists, and they were sent all around the known world at that time. The beginnings of distance education. So one could argue that God, through the intercession of St. Paul, did invent distance education, not the classroom. And Gutenberg, he invented the printing press, but his books were this big, like this, and there'd be one book in each university on different subject, but one book on each subject, whatever. And there'd be a big book like that with a lock and key, and it was a lecturer. Lecturer means to read. And he would open the book to the page, they'd have it marked, and he'd read. And the students would listen to him, although even back then there were students sleeping in the back of the classroom. But this was the only way they could learn. There was only the one book, so they'd go into the classroom. However, this guy came along, Aldo Manuzio, an Italian, in the 15th century. He invented the portable book. Small book could fit in your saddlebag. With this invention now, people could learn without being in a classroom. Now they could learn on their own. Did you know many universities in Europe at that time, they banned these portable books? Because they didn't want you to learn on your own. They wanted to control the knowledge and what people learned, and learn it only from them. Which opens this question of community or accessibility. What technology has done more to destroy human community than any other? Any guesses here? Any opinions? Sorry? The printed word. Yes, the book. The portable book. Because now you can learn on your own. You don't need a community. And people are always saying, well, technology destroys community. Well, no. People are communing on the internet. They're using the internet to build up relationships. Television. You watch television with your family in a group. Other inventions promote community. But the portable book is the one technology where you can learn on your own and you don't need a community. So, what we have to look at is Tom Russell's no significant difference phenomenon. And what this says, it doesn't matter what technology you use, what media you use, whether it's at a distance or in a classroom, the achievement level of the students is the same. It's totally, regardless of the technology or media. He has 355 studies on his website showing this. So anyone who claims that classroom learning is somehow superior to distance learning has no evidence. There's no evidence of this. All the evidence points to no significant difference. Of course, the evidence also shows that online learning isn't better than classroom learning. So what we can say is traditional education, the emperor has no clothes. Okay? People who keep saying, oh, well, distance education is second best. If they can't come to the classroom, we have to put in distance education. Well, no, there's no evidence of that at all. Distance education, Cinderella has become a princess. Now, all universities in Canada are doing some form of distance education. And blended education is the norm. In fact, there is no such thing as traditional classroom education alone in Canada now. It's mixture of both. So we need to be online and get online and learn online. When you think about it, the whole world is online. The world is digital. The world is on the internet. The world economy is online. And we're going to have our classrooms not online. Our classrooms are not digital. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to have a world like that. Another point, and this is something that I found happening a lot lately, is we're getting reports from papers from researchers who say, oh, the students, they loved the course, they collaborated, they were mindful, supportive, they felt they learned a lot. And they don't show any evidence of learning. And it comes from this new idea of learner-centeredness. No, if you're a teacher, you need to be learning-centered. Did they learn anything? Yes, it's great they're happy. It's great that they think they learned. It's great that they're mindful. It's great that they collaborated. But it's only great if they learn something. What are you doing in your classroom if they don't learn anything? And so learning-centered is better than this learner-centered. And you have no idea how many articles we've rejected of them putting in and not mentioning a word about learning. And some of them we say, you know, the students were happy, great, send it to a psychology journal. You know, that's great, you know, because the psychology journal is interested in people being happy. We're interested in learning. Now, if happiness helps them to learn, and you have evidence of that, and there is learning there, this is good research. You know, because I sort of believe it, that happy students learn better than unhappy ones. I haven't seen any proof of it yet, because the people who are looking at student happiness and learner-centeredness and that, they're not connecting it to learning. They're just saying, oh, isn't it wonderful? They're great collaborations. The learner-centered experience, if you look at this, you know, they talk about, and I've had all of these articles, they talk about the value of relationships, of positive identity, of satisfaction, empathy, engagement, creativity. These are important. I'm not saying these are not important things to be studying, but did the students learn anything? If you're in a classroom or not in a classroom, you're at a distance, whatever, this is really important. And it's shocking to me. I keep getting these papers, and I blame it on this emphasis on learner-centeredness. We've already talked about games for learning, and this is very important that we should start rethinking learning using games. It came about in the 1950s. The Americans started using simulators to train their troops. It's in the American Army. And some of the students, the troop students, started playing games on them. And the teachers got very angry with them. So these are serious machines, you do not play games on them. And they were banned from playing games on them. But some students would sneak in the night and get on them and start playing games. And after a few years, the instructors thought, wow, the guys who get on there and play the games, they're our best students. They're the ones who know how to use the machine better than anybody else. And they changed their mind about it, and they said, okay, let them play the games. And then they decided, okay, let's put some goals and things in there and direct them in playing the game so that they can learn everything. And now they've done it in all kinds of areas. They do training with games all the time. And why do they do it? Not because they want their students to be happy. They don't care in the military whether you're happy. In fact, they like it when you're not happy. They do it because the training, the achievement level, the learning is faster and more effective using the games. And a lot faster and a lot more effective. Oh, we've already done that one. MOOCs. I'm not going to talk about MOOCs today. I could talk, give a 1 or 2 hour session just on MOOCs. So today, 2 things I want you to remember is we don't really know what they are. They're like this, a hybrid something or other. And it was invented in Canada. The Americans think they invent everything. Nothing happens in the world till it happens in America. But George Siemens and Stephen Downes, they were the first MOOC, and I actually participated in the first MOOC. They were the instructors, but I helped them and helped mentor students in that course, 2008. That's all you need to know about it for the time being. So there's been a shift in computing. I mentioned before, desktops are pretty well dying out. Mobile phones are coming in, and tablets are becoming the shift in computing. More and more people are using those. There's a growing mobile workforce, so mobile learning is becoming more and more relevant. And mobile traffic is growing very rapidly. We have the huge number of internet connections. 40% of the world's population is now online, and most access the internet with mobile devices. 2.3 billion people have mobile broadband. So we can, again, I want to reiterate how important it is for mobile and designing our courses for mobile. 51% of the world's population is now online. This is an incredible development. And learning in the modern workforce, it's the smallest number that do it through courses. Others learn it through resources. Others learn through social collaborations with their colleagues. But most people learn through personal learning and becoming more autonomous. And that's what's happening in the workplace. And we need to create modules and have modules, especially OER modules, that anyone can use and build up their personal learning. So let's get real. The world economy is online. The world economy is global. Therefore, our students must be online and they must be global. That's the way the world is today. Virtual mobility is important. So let's wake up and smell the coffee. Of course, in Canada, we invented the first integrated cell phone with a camera. Now, here's a new phenomenon coming in called hearables. Have you heard of hearables? Anyone? They're wireless smart microcomputers. They have intelligence, artificial intelligence. They have a speaker and a microphone, and they fit in your ear. They connect to the internet and other devices, and they're designed to be worn daily. And they're tiny, they're nearly weightless, they perfect fit in the ear canal, they're comfortable over time, they have sufficient battery power, a strong antenna, a microphone, and a microprocessor. So you're thinking of the whole old hearing aids, that was just for hearing. This is for hearing, and you speak to it and it answers you in your ear. It developed from these devices. These are the old devices: sound amplifiers, earbuds, hearing aids, headphones, and it's a development from that. And these new devices, they cancel out unwanted background noise. They're very good at that. They amplify the voice of a particular person, so as if you're focusing on one person and there's talk around you, it focuses on them. And you can converse in another language. And however, there is a stigma to these devices. When people see them, they think of old guys like me who weren't cool with an hearing aid. And so they're trying to find ways of making it more fashionable. And this is one way they're doing it, is by making them very cool looking when you're using them. They use intelligent voice recognition. So they recognize your voice, and there's an intelligent virtual assistant in there. And you get them like the Bragi Dash uses iTranslate, so as it translates as you're wearing it. It's a subset of wearables. There's a lot of new wearables like Google Glass, the Fitbit, self-lacing shoes, etc. These are all a subcategory of wearables. It's also a subset of audibles, like Amazon Echo, Alexa. Most of us are familiar with her, or Siri on your phone, or Google Assistant. And they estimate that they'll be in 63% of US homes by 2023. So again, the hearable is a subset of audibles, and it's becoming an interface revolution. Now I've experienced experimented with 5 of them, and the language translation, I've done it with Russian, Vietnamese, Spanish, and French. It works. It works, but it doesn't work all the time. It's not there yet, but it's coming. So I'm speaking in English, they're speaking in Russian. It translates in my ear into English, and with very little delay. But you can't depend on it. It doesn't work all the time. Plus, you need a robust internet connection. So if you're out on the street away from an internet connection, you're going to have the trouble. But what it is that this is coming. This is going to be revolutionary, and they're getting better all the time. My daughter-in-law, she's a professional translator, and she's glad she's going to be retiring in a few years because she sees these things coming, and it's going to change things quite dramatically. These hearables are used already in factories quite a bit. So somebody comes up, they have to fix a pipe or a part, and the manual is in his ear, and it goes along and explains what to do as he's doing the job. A salesperson can learn on the job. As she's going to a meeting, it's telling her about the client and what the latest information is, and she can talk back to it and ask it questions, etc. And in education, these are excellent devices for self-directed learning. Workers on the job, anyone, anywhere, can use these devices for learning. They're great for personal learning, connectivism. They're context-aware, adaptive, individualized, personal learning networks. I did a few presentations and I brought them with me, but I stopped doing it because you can't have people touching them. you know, if it's in your ear, it can't go in somebody else's ear. This is a real no-no. Talk about the viruses and spreading things. This is a real no-no. So you don't do that anymore. I mean, the one thing is it's your hearing aid, and it's not for anyone else. But they go along, and it's like a Fitbit, and it'll tell you, hold on. The ear is the best place to monitor your body. It knows more about your body than you do. It can, the electricity in your brain, your heart rate, your blood pressure, it can do all of this in your ear. And it could be that you're running along and you're in danger of having a heart attack. It will tell you. It can tell you that. And because it's monitoring, that they're being used now quite at the beginning stages in health, for health reasons. But we need to use them in education as well. And this story of memento homo, it means remember you are a man. And this is when Julius Caesar came back, Augustus Caesar. Augustus Caesar came back from the war. They had a big parade. And he got one of his slaves to stand behind him and keep saying to him, remember, you are not a god, you are a man. You are not a god, you are a man. And these hearables could be in your ear telling you that all the time. So as if you get too fancy about yourself, it'll tell you, well, hold on a minute, you're not that great. So they could be used for that purpose as well. And of course, we have our OER, which we've discussed in the past, and I won't go through that again. This is what I'll go through: is before we go any further, if you want more information on OER, the OER Knowledge Cloud has about 2,500 scholarly articles and reports about open educational resources. It's for researchers. But we'll talk quickly about assessment and credentials. In North America, the first 2 years of university, you can transfer them pretty well anywhere. If I do go to the University of Waterloo and I have my first year courses, I switch the next year and go to McGill, they accept them. They just get the transcript sent over and they say, okay, we give you credit for that. It's not a big problem. It's problematic in the last 2 years where they will say, well, hold on a minute, this isn't McGill history. This is University of Waterloo history. If you want a history degree from McGill, you have to take our courses. So in the 3rd and 4th year, they get a bit antsy about it. But in the first 2 years, there's no problem. In Europe, they're doing the Bologna process, trying to get credit transfer all over. The Commonwealth of Learning has developed the Transnational Qualifications Framework for the Virtual University of the Small States of the Commonwealth. An excellent document for lining up credits and how they are over different countries and different systems. They have procedures and guidelines for this, and we use it in the OERU. Recognition of prior learning is beginning to grow. We've been doing it for years at our university. We're probably the leaders in Canada on it. And basically, it's somebody says, I have this much knowledge, and we say, well, what have you got to prove it? And they may have certificates and degrees and this and that from all over the place. We examine it, they put it into a portfolio, we look at it and we say, this is worth 25 credits or 30 credits or whatever. And that's prior learning, and we do that all the time. We also have challenge for credit, where a student comes up to us and says, oh, I know second year French. Oh, is that right? Here's the test. We give them the test. Second year French. Yeah, you do know it. We'll give you the credit. Give you the credit for biology. You come somebody who's worked in a hospital for a while and understands and knows biology, and they come in and we give them the test on biology, and if they pass the test, we give them the credit. And but it's very few institutions doing this. we do it. It's very important in Canada where we have a lot of immigrants. 52% of our population is either immigrants or the children of immigrants. So it's a big thing, and we only are letting people in now. We allow 350,000 a year if they have credentials. We're only letting people in who are educated or tradespeople or whatever. But when they come in, we don't recognize their credentials. It's ridiculous. And so they have to come and get some way of getting their credentials recognized. They come to our university and we help them with these challenge for credit exams, prior learning, etc. There's very little automated testing. We're getting into it in a big way now. We need automated, cost-effective systems. And these automated systems are not just multiple choice. We have automated essay marking, and they're very good. They're probably, at this stage, they're better than humans in marking essays. And competency-based assessment is becoming the norm. That is, that you actually prove that you can do the skill that you say you have. And the problem is that learners who access OER and acquire knowledge and skills cannot have their learning assessed and accredited. It's a big problem around the world, and the OER has been built to address that, because present systems are unsustainable, they're not scalable. We need more cost-effective ways of delivering higher quality education, and we believe OER will form part of the solution. For how many learners? Well, this is the general idea, is learners access courses based solely on OER. They're not even students at any, it could be anyone anywhere in the world. We do have Academic Volunteers International, where mentors help them, or former students who've taken the course. When they feel they're ready, they go for open assessment from participating institutions. So let's say they're in South Africa, they come to Northwest University digitally, and they take your exam, your assessment, and they get a credential from you. If they're in Canada, they'll come to us. Or maybe somebody's international and they can go to any one of these institutions. Then they get the credit if they pass the exam, and if they pass a number of courses, they could get a credible degree or credential. And that's what we're doing with Northwest University and 25 other institutions around the world. This is a better way of looking at it. Is the traditional method is our students, using our faculty, take our courses and they get our credential. The OERU model is any learners anywhere, not affiliated with any institution, using any faculty or no faculty at all, using any course materials, OER or something else. But if they want an NWU credential, they take your NWU exam. If they want an Athabasca credential, they take our exam. And that's the model that we're working with you on. Disaggregation is coming. Our university has just put all of our computer systems on Amazon. So we're not doing it at our university anymore, at least our main structured systems. And so these things can all be changed, but I'm running out of time, so I'll just finish up with these statements. Professor Whiteside at MIT said that affordability in the future may be the first requirement, not an afterthought. And the race may not be to the swift, but to the cheap. We need to make education accessible to everybody. So I'll finish up with this story about the frog. And some of you may have heard it, but if you put a frog in water, you slowly heat up the water till it boils. By the time it's boiled, his legs are cooked and he can't jump, and he can't get out. And I tell this story because The technology is bubbling all around us. All this new technology. We've got to jump. We've got to change. If we don't, we're cooked. We're in big trouble. Anyway, I put this story out on the internet, and I got an email from another country, and it said, very sorry, Professor McGrail, but at 46 degrees Celsius, a knee-jerk reaction in the something muscle of the right anterior or something else causes it to automatically eject itself from the water. And I thought, oh my God, there's people all around the world putting frogs in water and boiling it because of my story. So I had to put out a disclaimer. I said, look, I come from the maritime region of Canada, and there we don't let the facts interfere with a good story. It's just a story. You know, don't put frogs in boiling water. So with that, thank you very much. Appreciate your attention, and hope we can have more discussion. I love disagreements. I'm not a typical Canadian where we all agree. In Canada, everybody agrees. But it doesn't mean they really agree.
Before I open the floor, I think we can have some open discussion. I want to maybe just take this opportunity to thank Professor Rory very much for everything this week, but especially for today's session. And I've got a little token of our appreciation.